But now we've got some work to do. This session is called Workforce Preparation, Career Development for Young People. It's chaired by Raimo Vuorinen from Finland. Raimo works as a researcher at the Institute for Educational Research at the University of Jyväskylä.
Jyväskylä.
Oh, yeah, okay. Jyväskylä. Each time in this point you've got to say that, okay? Since 1987 he's been a trainer of career practitioners in Finland. In his work as a trainer and researcher, Mr. Raimo Vuorinen has been focusing on ICT and guidance and strategic planning of career services and guidance policies. He's a member of the European Commission's Lifelong Guidance Expert Group, and I'm just passing it over to you now, Raimo, to run this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete, for this introduction. And we are having the third session, and we could start that if you have the blue handout number 3, which has the title theme B, Career Development for Young People. And this morning, Helen Silver already mentioned that participation can be enhanced by means of smooth transitions. And she also mentioned that there's a need for information as a basis for these smooth transitions. And as practitioners, we can help our clients to make help in these transitions and to make well-informed and well-thought-through transitions. I would like to quote Tony Watts as he is talking about these informed and well-thought-through choices, but also transitions as well. And within the OECD activity, we found out that in many countries there are many good examples of these ways how transition is promoted in comprehensive and secondary education, and also in some cases in higher education as well. But there were many varieties of these existing practices. And within the evaluation, there was few challenges remained. And if you look at the executive summary of the policy handbook, which is within your folder, there's a statement that there are challenges in meeting gaps in access and improving the nature, level and quality of services. And in schools, the principal challenges are to provide sufficient human and capital resources of the right type, both within the school and within the surrounding community, and to ensure that these resources are dedicated to career guidance and to make best use of the resources that are available. And within the questions or the country reports, you were asked or invited to provide input for the conference around this topic. And this workshop, we will now go through some of the findings within the country reports. And it's my pleasure to introduce Richard Sweet, who will introduce to this team with its about 20 minutes input. But before he starts, I would like to introduce Richard or some of his talents while he was working within the OECD activity. And many of us were lucky to work in this activity when we were preparing the evaluation and the format. And he was very, very skilled in coordinating the activity, but on the other hand, he had a very consultative role because there were many nations and many definitions and many activities, and he could coordinate all these different approaches. And he had amazing skills, how he was able to focus on details, but on the other hand, on the broad picture. And he could work both on practice and also policy level. And I remember many times when we were discussing some of the findings and he was asking, where's the data? But on the other hand, if there was no data available, he said that, well, there is some data in the OECD files and databases. So in a way, he did a very good job in coordinating preparation of the activity and with Tony when they were completing the report. And as a result of that, he was nominated as a chair of the executive board of the International Center for Career Development and Public Policies, and I think it provides him a platform to continue this valuable work. And I hand up for you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Raimo. If I'd known you were going to say that, I would have told you to say something else. Our focus in this session is on career development for young people. The reason, there are, I think, two reasons why I put my hand up to do the synthesis paper for this session. I've had a long-standing interest in the transition phase of people's lives, the period between the end of compulsory education and the mid-20s, both in the education issues and the labour market issues. And before working on the OECD review of career guidance policies, I worked on the OECD review of young people's transition from school to work. So it's an area that I've had a long-standing interest in. And perhaps another reason is that for years people have been asking me what I want to do when I grow up, and I still don't know, and I still haven't grown up. So I think I'm qualified in some ways to work on this. My role here in giving an input is not to really say anything of my own or anything original. My role really is simply to feed back to you what you said to us when you wrote the country papers. It won't be a long intervention on my part. I'm basically going to summarise what I saw as some of the key messages in the reports. Okay, just to remind you what, within the context of the symposium as a whole, what the overall focus of this particular session is. It's up there as a statement, but you could also put it as a question. How can we use career development services for young people to do three things? First of all, to increase the supply of labour. Secondly, to raise the absolute amount or the level of human capital. And thirdly, to improve the quality of a country's human capital. And how can we do this? By doing two things. The first is developing young people's career self-management skills, and the second by developing their employability skills. Now, within that sort of overall focus, if you look at all of the country papers that were submitted for the meeting, it's clear that there was wide variation between the papers, first of all in how clearly the authors of the paper or papers or the countries understood the issues as they affect young people and understood the issues phrased in the way that I just have phrased it. That what we're trying to do is use career development services for young people to increase the supply of labour, raise the absolute level of human capital and improve its quality by developing career self-management skills and employability skills. Understanding that type of framework is, for whatever reasons, not necessarily one which we found in all of the papers. There's also fairly wide variation between the papers in just the detail of the description they contained about what national career development services are doing about the issues and are doing for young people. Now, sometimes, of course, this was because, and some of the papers were very honest about this, because in absolute terms, career development services in some countries are very limited indeed. I mean, my impression of the papers in Bhutan and India, for example, are two of them that made it very clear that it seems to be not terribly realistic, was the message I got, to talk about career development service for youth in these terms, because the proportion of the population that can get access to service is just so small. There were some common, if you like, gaps in the papers. First of all, and I didn't find this surprising, and I don't find this a criticism of the papers at all, most of the papers tended to focus much more upon adults than upon young people. In other words, upon existing workers rather than future workers. And I think this was probably inevitable, given the ways in which the issues for the workshop were established and the way we described the issues and the way in which the title for the workshop, for the symposium, was articulated. I mean, it really was. I mean, there's the term workforce there, and it's quite natural for a lot of countries to have focused primarily on the workforce, the present workforce. But I think one real gap, which I think was a weakness in papers, which reflected some of the weaknesses that we found in the OECD review, is that treatment of higher education services generally was very limited. It was almost as if young people stop when they leave school, even though in most, certainly OECD countries, and most developing countries probably even more so, nearly all higher education students are relatively young, under the age of 25. But despite these gaps, there were some excellent examples that could be found in the collection of papers, and rather than list all of them here, I'll refer to some of them as we go through the summary further. The first issue that... Oops, Daisy. Next slide, please. There we go. The first issue that I want to talk about is the question of using career development services for young people to increase labour supply. Talk about it first because it seemed to me that this one is the one where the link is most easily understood in the country papers, partly because this is something that many countries' career services for youth see themselves as having been doing for quite some time. Oops, and Daisy. There we go. One of the ways in which countries see themselves as having used career development services to increase labour supplies by something we've heard about already today, to address the issue of early school leaving, a key target for services for youth. Addressing early school leaving so that more young people get educational qualifications in a number of ways. First of all, by using services for youth to help reduce dropouts, early school dropouts. Secondly, the papers describe ways in which services for youth are being used to help early leavers to return to study so they can get a full high school, upper secondary qualification. And thirdly, career services are used in very many countries to, as one of the ways in which unemployed youth can get work. A couple of examples that I've pulled out of the papers, which are on the screen, is first of all, I think Austria's description of a three-tiered system of guidance within schools. It's a very well articulated model. I mean, when we did the OECD review, said it's a terrific model, but you really need to put more resources into it to realise its full potential, and that indeed might have happened since we were there. But certainly it's a very well articulated model that says what we'll do is have a three-pronged approach that uses a combination of career education in the curriculum, individualised counselling and career advice, and specialised psychological services. And the intensity of the services increases as you go up each tier, and at the same time the proportion of young people who access those services decreases, so that everybody gets access to and uses the curriculum-based services. Not everybody, but only those who feel that they need it, get individual counselling and guidance, and those who are perceived to have very special problems get access to services provided by specialised psychologists. Second example of the ways in which career development services are being used to address early school leaving that I've pulled out is Denmark, where there's quite an extensive set of programs that are being described to help to improve young people's motivation to learn and hence to increase school participation, both programs within the school and programs for those young people who have left school early through things like individual action planning that career services are heavily involved in. Next issue is using career development services for young people to raise the quality of human capital. I mean, by increasing labour supply and addressing early school leaving, countries are trying to do something about raising the absolute level of human capital, but here we're talking about the qualitative nature. And here we're looking at something that we heard about in the last session, which is using services for young people by going beyond just helping to raise educational completion rates to using them to try and focus upon developing young people's career self-management skills and their employability skills. And this, next slide please. Yeah, okay. Romo's the technical. See, this is why he, that's right, he's the expert in technology and counselling, you see. There we go, thank you. Now this, we're there. If career development services are to be, for young people, are to be used to help young people to develop career self-management and employability skills, this requires a changed approach, a shift from a focus upon one point in time decisions to an approach that develops skills over time. And as you would have seen already from the next slide, on at least one occasion, maybe twice, this requires a changed approach, and some countries clearly do recognise this, and some countries clearly are taking steps to do something about it. And I think that's one of the most positive aspects of the country papers. For example, it should say on the next slide. There we go. And here we've got 4 countries where quite clearly there are things in the country papers that show how they are trying to shift to this new approach. Ireland is taking steps to much more, to embed career education in the curriculum. I mean, we were struck when we did the review of Ireland by the fact that almost nobody had the opportunity to get access to career education as part of the school curriculum, except in some very, very specialised cases. And we actually thought that the emphasis upon external examinations in Ireland might prevent the introduction of career education, but it's very encouraging in the Irish paper to see the sorts of steps that have been taken to ensure that a curriculum approach is introduced. The Norwegian paper points out that their careers curriculum is being strengthened, and they're doing a lot. This has been a strong theme in Norway for a number of years, to strengthen partnerships between schools and employers in order to improve young people's connections to the labour market. Both Denmark and Finland describe their programs of individual action planning, having all young people sit down and develop plans for their life and their careers, and then work through what the implications of this are for, in particular, their education. And Australia, in its paper, says that it points out that it's developed a national employability skills framework, although it does say that the schools are very slow to adopt this, but there has been significant take-up of it in the vocational education and training sector. So that the papers do have some good material to hang hooks upon, some good material to use as positive examples of this broader approach to services for young people. The papers also, next slide please, point to some barriers in achieving this new type, or this, if you like, this much broader approach. The barriers that are raised in the papers are fairly similar, and the best examples, I think, in the papers are provided by Ireland, which says, look, one of the problems we've got is that practitioners thinking about these issues is still pretty traditional, and what they want to do is the same old things I've always been doing, which is one-to-one, face-to-face interviews at one point of time. And the Norwegians say there is a need for a paradigm shift in thinking. So my input, before Raimo moves on to the questions for discussion, will be limited to what I thought was a very nice quotation in the Norwegian paper. And it's very, I mean, it's spirit, and I'll point out where I think it is. To me, seems to be a very Norwegian one. It's quite a nice one. The quotation is, Norwegian career guidance has had too great a focus on providing information on education opportunities and career choices. The new aim is that career guidance should become more development and process oriented. Importance shall be attached, and this is the nice Norwegian approach. I mean, the Norwegians just don't say should be attached, but they say it shall be attached. I mean, it's really positive and affirmative. This is going to happen. Importance shall be attached to allowing individuals to develop the competence to plan their own future and to develop a career plan in cooperation with the career counsellor. Okay, that's the end of my input.
Okay, thank you, Richard, for this very thorough analysis of the synthesis papers, or the papers that within the synthesis that you introduced us. And